Welcome in. It is Sports by the Book Football Frenzy on a Monday. Wrapping up week one in the National Football League. I'm Jeff Parles, thrilled to be with you as we get ready for a matchup with two teams with high expectations for the 2024 campaign. We have a great show lined up. We'll go through everything you need to know about the San Francisco 49ers hosting the New York Jets in the final game of week one. Matt Hamilton will also join us on the show. He produces Up and Adams. He's also a football analyst and the host of The Breakdown on KCSN. And then a few names that I know everyone out there is familiar with. Our version of Murderers Row. Andrews and Magliulo will join us for the last 15 minutes of the program, 45 minutes from now. Get the perspective from behind the book. And we'll also get Chris's thoughts from week one. And I'll give my thoughts as well, with a little bit of a gambling twist to some of them, including what could have been worse for Green Bay, especially off what Matt LaFleur have to say today in Green Bay. All right, let's dive right in to this one tonight. The 49ers and the New York Jets at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. When the game was announced in the middle of May, when the NFL schedule pulled out that schedule and told all of us about it, the San Francisco 49ers were put up as a 6-point favorite behind me. And as the months have gone along, got as low as 3.5. And it settled in pretty nicely over the last 2 hours at 4 after touching 4.5 yet again at about 12:30 Pacific time here at the South Point. And the total opened at 44.5, was as high as 45. You got a 43.5 on this total for the Jets and the Niners. Looking at both of these teams and looking at this game for tonight, starting with the homestanding Niners, we know they were oh so close to winning that elusive Lombardi that they have not won since Steve Young was playing quarterback for the 49ers in 1994. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, leading a drive at the end of regulation to get the game tied, getting the ball first in overtime of that Super Bowl, driving all the way down, unable to connect with George Kittle, which set up the go-ahead field goal. And then we know what happened. Kansas City went right down the field, and McCall Hardman, former Jet, scored the game-winning touchdown and Super Bowl-winning touchdown for Kansas City. Now as the Niners enter this season, this was a very tumultuous offseason for San Francisco that has really gotten better over the last few days. Did not look like Brandon Ayuk was even going to be in the rust and gold moving forward. We even saw from the story from Jay Glazer that he was very close to accepting that deal to the Pittsburgh Steelers, vetoed it at the last minute, and the Niners and Ayuk came to terms on a long-term contract last week. 4-year extension north of $130 million for Brandon Ayuk. And for San Francisco, having Brandon Ayuk around with Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffery vaults them yet again as, to me, the second best team in the NFC. I still have Detroit better. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But the Niners are still my number 2 power-rated team in the conference. They also brought Trent Williams back. He agreed to a long-term extension. Great news for them on that front. Of course, the bad news for the Niners, they'll be without their first-round pick, their wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall, who, again, was shot in an attempted robbery in San Francisco about 10 days ago. He will be fine. Again, was able to survive and is out of the hospital already. But the Niners' expectations with a high win total of 11.5, the odds-on favorites to win the NFC West yet again, all sorts of expectations for them going into this season. On the Jets side of things, we know the Aaron Rodgers deal already. Only played 4 plays before rupturing his left Achilles a year ago, missing basically the entire season, and the Jets paid the price for not having a competent backup behind him. 7-10 for the second consecutive year. A little bit of a surprise that Robert Saleh is still around for year number 4 in New York, has not finished better than 7-10. The Jets come in with a vastly improved offensive line, adding 3 new linemen with Tyron Smith, the perennial All-Pro at left tackle, Morgan Moses and John Simpson on that offensive line, added from Baltimore to get Elijah Vera Tucker back after a second season-ending injury happening in Denver a year ago. So that Jet offensive line fully fortified, and we know that defense projected to be one of the 3 best in the NFL. And the fun thing about this matchup tonight is we have, to me, number one defense and number two defense. Put them in whatever order you want. These defenses are awesome. And that's part of the reason that this total has been banged down to 43.5. And I still like this total under. We have seen this week in the National Football League, and I'll get into some of the quarterbacking numbers in a second. We have seen quarterbacks struggle throwing the ball down the field. We have seen quarterbacks struggling to score touchdowns. We have seen the defenses well ahead of these offenses here for week one. There are some select scenarios where we haven't. But you look at the way, you just look at this week one for passing leaders. For passing leaders in week one. Tua Tagovailoa and Matthew Stafford are the only two guys who've thrown for over 300 yards this week. We've had more 120-plus yard rushers than 300-yard passers. That does not happen very often in week one. By the way, Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, Lamar Jackson, ironically enough, and Ramondre Stevenson all over 120 yards. J.K. Dobbins looked pretty spry for the Chargers yesterday. That would be a good sign of things to come for L.A., but this under still, even at the worst number, as compared to what you could have had it earlier in the summer, still feels good to me. That's my favorite play from a traditional sense. The Jets are more than good enough to stay in this game getting 4 points. They're more than good enough to win this game completely outright. But as we saw yesterday with Kirk Cousins, I do have some reservations about Aaron Rodgers here in this week one game. Kirk Cousins yesterday left the pocket twice the whole game. The Atlanta Falcons did not run a single play under center. Whenever they were out of pistol, they ran the ball 80% of the time. They didn't run a run play out of the shotgun. It was a very uninventive game plan for Kirk Cousins, similar in age to Aaron Rodgers, slightly younger, and the exact same injury in a ruptured Achilles. Cousins became the first quarterback to start the following year after a ruptured Achilles since Trent Dilfer in 2003. I think there's a reason why we went 20 years without an NFL quarterback starting week one the year after a ruptured Achilles, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be the second in 2 days. So I am a little bit concerned about the Jets' well-being at the quarterback position, at least in week one, after seeing Cousins just struggling to move around yesterday. And Rodgers, look, he had an extra 2 months. Cousins had his injury a little bit later in the year, but there are a lot of concerns about Aaron Rodgers' mobility for me going into this game. That's why I'm not all the way there on taking the points with the Jets, even though that is a strong lean to me on that, and that's why I like the under as the best play in this game from a traditional sense. Anytime touchdown props, I just want to hit on real quick because Christian McCaffery scored in all but all but 2 games a year ago. Christian McCaffrey is pushing a minus 200 price at most shops. DraftKings has minus 175. There was only one price better in the market. Superbook had minus 145, which is an amazing price on Christian McCaffrey. Still probably a good bet at minus 145 if you can find it. As long as you're not laying $2 to score a touchdown, I still think that's good on McCaffrey. The way that if there's any flaw in the Jets defense, it is that their run stuffing ability, even with an all-pro Quinn Williams, they're still not the greatest of run defenses. They are the best pass defense in the National Football League. And this should be a run-heavy plan from San Francisco. I was looking for Brandon Ayuk props earlier in the day. Ayuk plus 170 to score an anytime touchdown. Receptions were only 3.5. The best number on the board was 50.5. That was over at FanDuel. That's still too low to be looking at Brandon Ayuk, but I am looking for ways to fade Brandon Ayuk tonight because of the holdout, and it just takes some time to get fully into football shape. I know he was still in good shape while not with the team or holding in, whatever way you want to do it, but he would be the guy I look to fade. The best anytime touchdown price of the night is still Breece Hall. You can get as good as plus 135 in the market. DraftKings at plus 120. There's even money out there on Breece Hall. As I said on our fantasy football special, I think Breece Hall is in for a gigantic year. The two best, it's actually pretty amazing for this Monday night game. The two best defenses and the two best running backs in the NFL are on the field tonight. You don't see that very often. And I expect this to be the start of a monster campaign for Breece Hall, where he is going to be in the discussion with Christian McCaffrey to win Offensive Player of the Year and those great receivers. That's still my favorite bet of the anytime touchdown props on Breece Hall. I do want to bring up one last thing of what we learned in week one, and then I actually will bring this conversation over to our friend Matt Hamilton, who's going to join us after the break. The Packers got pretty good news today, all things considered, about Jordan Love's injury. He's not going on IR designated to return. Matt LaFleur said that they will not bring in another quarterback. But Love, again, unexpected to be ready with that MCL injury that he suffered in Sao Paulo on Friday night, will bring the Green Bay Packers Malik Willis as the starter, as Matt LaFleur said, with Clifford backing him up. We have seen this song before with not having a good enough backup behind a high-end starter. The Jets went through this last year. Minnesota went through this as well last year after Cousins went out. If the Packers have Jordan Love on the bench for more than a few weeks, Green Bay is staring 0-4 straight in the face. And Indianapolis, who is going to be about a 4-point underdog in this game coming up this week against Green Bay, is now about a 3-point favorite in the market. Behind us, it is exactly 3. Green Bay's power rating gets torpedoed. We always talk about big differences between quarterback 1 and quarterback 2. 7, I think, is right, and maybe even not enough with what we've seen in Malik Willis's career so far. And I'm very interested to see just how long Jordan Love is out. But from a betting perspective, the Packers, who I had in my top 10, you put Malik Willis in there, they're in the bottom 10 of the league. And that's not because they don't have talent around Jordan Love and whoever quarterback is playing. That's just because Malik Willis is that bad as an NFL starter. And we have seen that enough in his limited action across his few-year career in the NFL. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to bring up the quarterback stat with Matt Hamilton and get his thoughts about what we've seen from the quarterbacks this week and much more with Matt Hamilton of Up and Adams and the KCSN when we get back on Sports by the Book Football Frenzy.
South Point offers all the types of entertainment you'd expect at a first-class Las Vegas resort. Did you know our 400-seat showroom is one of Las Vegas's top destinations for live entertainment? Enjoy live performances by classic Vegas entertainers, bands, and today's hottest comedians, plus a rockin' dance floor. You can also enjoy live entertainment at the Grandview Lounge, where you'll feel all the vibes of old Las Vegas. Enjoy the music, and if you love to laugh, don't miss The Dirty at 12:30, our very own free comedy show, every Friday night at 12:30 a.m. in the Grandview Lounge. The Dirty is 100% free, so arrive early. Go to southpointcasino.com or call the box office at 77136 for today's performances at the showroom and the Grandview Lounge. When you're ready for your favorite cocktail, stop in and unwind at one of our 7 specialty lounges. There's a bar around every corner, because you're in Vegas, baby. South Point Casino has plenty of attractions for the whole family. Catch a movie. Our 16-screen movie theater includes 2 XD Extreme screens for the ultimate in viewing, sound, and luxury. After the show, treat the family to a variety of treats at our old-fashioned ice cream parlor, Kate's Corner. We scoop up a variety of creamy concoctions, including smoothies, hand-dipped cones, milkshakes, malts, sodas, and sundaes. At Kate's, there's something for everyone. And if you've still got time to spare, our bowling center might be right up your alley. Voted Best of Las Vegas, it's a great place for friends and family fun. 64 lanes, a pro shop, snack bar, and arcade. And while the kids are bowling, you can play slots and sip on a drink in the Alley Cat Lounge while overlooking the lanes. For our more serious and professional bowlers, the South Point is also home to a separate tournament bowling plaza.
Welcome back in. Sports by the Book Football Frenzy is the show. Live at the South Point studio, as always, I'm Jeff Parles. If you're watching us on our YouTube page, Sports by the Book, where you can find us, we appreciate you. Rick Diaz in the chat, thank you for chatting along with us here on a Monday night going into the Jets and the 49ers. And now bringing in someone who I've known for a long while now. We're going on about 8 years since the first time I had this guy on my show. Now he is producing and he's on air at Up and Adams over at FanDuel TV. He's also the host of The Breakdown on KCSN. Matt Hamilton joins us right now. Matt, thanks for being with us this afternoon.
What's up, Jeff? Thank you for having me. Always excited to be here.
It's always a pleasure, man. And of course, Matt as well has experience with the Detroit Lions scouting department, also worked as a GA for the Missouri Tigers as well. So a lot of football background for Matt. And going into tonight, Matt, let's just look at this game. Let's start on the Niners side. Expectations through the roof. You and I have talked off the air about, hey, they needed to get the Ayuk deal done because the window might be closing after this year. They get the deal done. They get Trent Williams done as well. Just looking at tonight from the Niners, what are you looking forward to the most that would lead to a San Francisco 49er cover of the number here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, yes, they got these deals done, but how acclimated are Ayuk and Trent Williams going to be right out of the gates? They missed a lot of time with their team. I heard you talking about a little bit. You're looking to fade Ayuk. I'm there with you because we saw with Jamar Chase yesterday, even CeeDee Lamb. Both of them were, got off to slow starts. So I would imagine it's going to be similar to Ayuk. I'm interested to see how he looks. And again, that offensive line, there are new pieces there. Trent. Not that I'm expecting Trent to ever be bad because he is a Hall of Fame player, but it might take some time for him to get acclimated. So I'm going to be looking at those pieces on this Niners offense. And then also, I think a lot of the stuff with Christian McCaffery and the calf seem to be precautionary. They seem to be, just playing it safe. So I think we'll see him full go, but that's also something to keep an eye on there too with that offense.
Well, and it's interesting too, because the McCaffrey thing's kind of like just been swept under the rug the last few weeks. Showed up on the injury report, but is going to be good to go. And Matt, I just want to bring this up real quick with Brock Purdy. Last year, the closest thing to the Jet defense the Niners saw was Baltimore on Christmas night. And that was the worst game that Brock Purdy had all year. It actually cost him the MVP. Let's be honest with ourselves. He was a minus 240 favorite going into that game. Then he threw the 4 picks. Lamar was awesome on the other side, and we all know what happened. Just for Purdy tonight going against an elite defense that does have some of the DNA that the Niners defense does that he sees in practice every day.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Robert Saleh coming from the Niners, coming from that school. You're right. That's the one thing I think with Purdy we still have to see is against these elite defenses. Obviously, the Chiefs, too, an elite aggressive defense in the Super Bowl last year, gave him some issues. They gave that offensive line fits. And I think that's really a lot of it, not to take all of the onus off of Purdy, but the Niners offensive line last year, outside of Trent Williams, was not very good. And the Chiefs were able to exploit it. The Ravens were able to exploit it and speed up his clock. And when you do that, you can force him into some mistakes. And I think that's what the Jets are going to try to do. It's interesting to see because the Niners have rebuilt this offensive line a little bit. Everything I've seen and everything that I've heard out of San Francisco about Dominic Puni, their new right guard, is like they expect him to be, I think, an all-pro in the future. They're that high on him. So we'll see how much of a difference that makes in protecting Purdy, giving him a little bit more time back there and not having to speed up his clock. But yeah, this is a huge test, I think, for Purdy because I think that's the mark that's still on him that people are going to point to is, when he faces good defenses, he doesn't play well. So big opportunity for him tonight.
Looking at the Jets side of things, of course, right now, you see the numbers on the bottom of the screen. Niners, 4-point favorites in this one with a total of 43.5. But Matt, on the Jets side, I brought it up in the last segment. I'm just curious your thoughts. With seeing Kirk Cousins yesterday, who had the same injury as Aaron Rodgers, yes, about 2 months less recovery time for Cousins than Rodgers, which, by the way, kind of made all the nonsense with Rodgers at the end of last year even more nonsensical, but that's a different discussion for a different time. Just how much of a concern is there if you're looking to back the Jets tonight? How much of a concern with Rodgers being a 40-year-old coming off a major injury in the Achilles rupture of playing this defense right out of the chute? Oh, by the way, without taking a snap in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think, seeing what happened to Cousins definitely does amplify the concerns a little bit, but I do think it's different. This is all due respect to Kirk Cousins, this is Aaron Rodgers. I look at it differently. I think there were a number of factors that went into that. The Steelers front just absolutely dominated the Falcons yesterday. And again, coming off an injury like that where you might be a little less mobile, it was a recipe for disaster. And Cousins obviously really had a hard time overcoming it. It's hard for me to imagine that happening to Aaron Rodgers. Again, that might just be me being naive. But just watching Rodgers, being there at Jets training camp, watching the way he was moving, watching his command of the offense, he looked every bit like MVP Aaron Rodgers in those practices. And again, he didn't play in the preseason, but those were very competitive, feisty practices where the offense and defense were really going at it and trying to win. This wasn't him just going through the motions. He was locked in, and he looked amazing.
For the Jets, just going into this year, just want to go to the macro sense here, Matt, where we all know what happened last year. The ill-prepared after the Rodgers injury, 7-10, second straight year. For this team going into this year, where the expectations are the same that they were a year ago, get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl for the first time since Super Bowl III. Where do you see this Jet team stacking up going into the year, where you can still bet some win totals right now at 9.5? Where do you see them stacking up in a hierarchy at the top of this league?
I think they should be right there. It's hard because you look at it on paper and they absolutely should be. And, as we saw with the Falcons yesterday, what's on paper, it doesn't necessarily always matter. But again, I think when you have a defense like that to hang your hat on, it makes a huge difference. That's something the Falcons don't have. We still need to see who's going to emerge outside of Garrett Wilson in this receiving core for Aaron. But I heard you talking about it before, too, and I'm in total agreement. I think Breece Hall is ready to he had a very good year last year when everybody knew he was getting the ball every single play and was the only thing they had to worry about defensively. Now, with Aaron Rodgers back, I think we are going to see a monstrous year out of Breece. With what he can do in the passing game, especially, too. I'm watching those Jets practices, too. They were using him on vertical routes. It was very similar to how the Packers were using Aaron Jones when Rodgers was there. So I think we're going to see a lot of catches out of him. I think we're going to see him with a lot more room to operate between the tackles as well because of the threat Aaron Rodgers poses. And I think the biggest key is going to be for Aaron not to try to do it all by himself, but lean on Breece when he needs to and let him make plays. And if they're giving you light boxes, give the ball to Breece and let him do his thing.
Matt, for this game, from a traditional sense, point spread, of course, Niners 4-point favorites, total right now 43.5. From a traditional sense, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a side in this game, or would you rather just look at that total for tonight?
That's a great question. It's tough with the totals after in week one. It's hard to have a feel. I think I would lean towards the spread. I do think the Niners cover. I think it's a competitive game, but I do think we see the Niners cover.
So you just mentioned with offenses struggling, and I brought this up in a little bit in the open, but now we'll give you the exact stat. This is from Steve Pazziolo, now at the 33rd team. He used to be at PFF. Matt, in 2021, real quick, there were 61 passing touchdowns thrown in week one. So far through 15 games of week one here in 2024, there have been 33 touchdown passes thrown. I'm not a mathematician. That is nearly double, nearly half the number, 28 less with one game to go. Last year, there were only 37 in week one. And I just have to ask you here, and we see a little bit of an uptick, but not much in week two a year ago, only 9 more. How much early season-wise now betting do we have to look at this and say, hey, well, as long as these guys don't play in the preseason, these quarterbacks are just not going to be ready to play week one more times than not?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think that's really what it comes down to. Teams are being more conservative in the preseason. Obviously, we have one fewer preseason game as well. And it matters always. The defense is always ahead of the offense as you're prepping for a season. Just naturally, that's how it is. Offenses tend to be more complicated and it takes more time for guys to get up to speed. Just in my experience, there have been college level, NFL level, when you see it, early on in camp, it's always the defense is always winning early, generally across the board. So it's going to take time for these offenses. I don't think, it's hard to imagine that a lot of these offenses don't get it going. Like, the Dolphins we saw yesterday go through those massive strides. It's hard to imagine that they don't turn it up. We saw it at the end of the game, but, as they pulled away from Jacksonville. But, it's hard to imagine these struggles are going to continue. I really do. I think it's all about reps, and it's probably going to be like week 3 when we see these teams finally start to settle in.
You brought up an offense that struggled mightily, and they were the biggest favorites to lose yesterday, and that was Cincinnati. And Joe Burrow, that wrist injury he suffered showed up yet again. He struggled to grip the ball multiple times. He didn't feel comfortable. He got rid of the ball a lot quicker than we're used to seeing Burrow do. And Matt, this is a team that had huge expectations going into the year. Oh, and by the way, the reward for losing to New England as 8-point favorites is they get to go right to Arrowhead next week. And right now, they're 6-point underdogs against the Chiefs, who are on extra rest with a second consecutive home game in week 2.
Yeah, it was as ugly as it could be yesterday for the Bengals. But I do think a lot of it, too, they get away from their bet. And we've seen it over the past couple of years. I mean, they tend to struggle out of the gates. They were 0-2 last year, got it going with Burrow before he got hurt. They were 0-2 in 2022. They made it to the AFC Championship game. I don't know why they tend to come out of the gates slow, but it is a thing with this team that we've seen repeat itself over the last few years. So I'm not totally freaking out yet, but the other issue is they get away from their identity. Their offense is at its best when it's balanced. And we saw it yesterday. They were 80% pass on their first 5 drives, didn't score a point. Their 6th drive, they're 50-50. They start handing the ball off to Zach Moss, and good things happened. And I think when you have Burrow, even though you didn't have Higgins out there, you have that receiving core, there's this want to start airing it out all over the place. But Joe is at his best when there's balance. This team is at its best when there's balance. And they have to get back to that. They struggled with it at points last year, even though there's a new OC now with Dan Pitcher. Those problems started to repeat themselves again, and hopefully they learn from it.
Matt, just looking at some other key games from this past week and looking into next week as well. You mentioned the Dolphins. They were very fortunate to get out of there with a win yesterday. And quite frankly, if Travis Etienne doesn't fumble going in, that game was over at 24-7. Instead, Miami wins 20-17. They take on Buffalo, who had their hands full all afternoon with an Arizona team who it's going to be a tough out here in 2024. Josh Allen also is nursing an injury to his left hand, not his throwing hand, thankfully, for Buffalo. Right now, Thursday night, short week, open 2. Now it's Miami 1.5-point favorites with a total of 50 on a short week in this big division game right out of the chute.
Yeah, it is. It's as good as it gets for the first Thursday night, first official TNF game of the year. It was interesting to see what this Bills, because that was one of the big questions of this offseason. What is the Bills offense going to look like without Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis? And it really did kind of continue from what we saw from Joe Brady last year when he took over for Ken Dorsey. The Bills were the heaviest run team in the NFL after Joe Brady took over, and it continued. They were heavier run than pass. I think Josh Allen had 2 pass attempts at the 2-minute warning in the first half yesterday. It was a lot of James Cook, and it was a lot of Josh Allen using his legs, which he told us at camp when we took our visit there that he doesn't like to run, that he doesn't want to do it as much. And next thing you know, he's leaping through the air through 3 defenders into the end zone. So it's going to be a part of their identity. It's going to be what they do when they're most successful. When he started using his legs, that's when the offense got going. So I think we're going to see them try to ground and pound the Dolphins a little bit, which I think also works in their favor. You try to take that offense out of rhythm, that passing game out of rhythm, keep Tyreek off the field as long as you can. And for the Dolphins side of it, I thought the offensive line, a big part of the struggles there were the offensive line. The Jaguars have we were talking about it. I think the Jaguars might have the best defensive line in the league this year, and they gave the Dolphins O-line all sorts of problems. So that's going to be a key. If they can protect Tua back there, give him time to find those downfield shots to Tyreek and Waddle, and Tua not forcing the ball. I think that's where he's gotten into issues against the Bills in the past, is he gets outside of his game. He is a distributor, and I'm not saying this in a pejorative way. He's at his best when he's making quick decisions, when he's using the misdirection in the backfield, when he's playing within himself. He's not the quarterback that's going to take it all on his shoulders and just become Superman. And when he tries to do that, bad things happen. So he has to play his game and let his playmakers make plays.
Matt, one last one. Looking to the following Monday night, a week from tonight, Atlanta goes north to Philly. The Eagles, again, that first quarter was awful, but after that, they played pretty well in that game. They get the win. They get the cover in Sao Paulo against the Packers. They're 6.5-point favorites against the Falcons, which is much elevated based off of what we saw from Atlanta. And, Matt, I'll just ask you point blank here with the Falcons. When is the time to panic on Cousins? Because that looked like a guy who was not healed from an Achilles injury. And for a team with such high expectations this year, you have Kansas City in week 3. I don't know how much you can really push the envelope here where you're staring an 0-3 in the face after yesterday's loss to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and that's where maybe the Penix pick isn't going to look so ridiculous after all if it gets to that point. But yeah, I think we're getting close to panic time, because it wasn't just bad. It was atrocious yesterday. I can't, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It was as ugly as anything we saw. And you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. There is so much new there. Maybe they can settle in. Maybe they can get it going. But there were ample opportunities for that offense to make something happen. And it was the turnovers. They weren't just, there's different levels of turnovers. Like those were unthinkable throws that Cousins was trying to make. So you do wonder if just being away for so long, getting his timing back, getting his feel for things back had something to do with it. But if it doesn't go well in Philly, it's time to hit the panic button. And there's no reason for me to have confidence that it is going to go well against Philly this week with how good the Eagles looked over the final 3 quarters of that game.
Yeah, the Eagles' improvement through the game was pretty jarring, which that first quarter, as bad as it gets, but they got the win, and especially what happened with Jordan Love, a gigantic win at that for Philadelphia right out of the gate in Brazil. He's Matt Hamilton. Of course, you can get him on the tweets at Matt Hamilton25. You see him on Up and Adams with Kay Adams on FanDuel TV. You also can find him on the KCSN, the Breakdown, the show on the Kansas City Sports Network. Matt, pleasure as always, man. Thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Always a good time. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Matt Hamilton, everyone. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we get back, we'll actually shift gears a little bit. I have my top 10 in college football and also a few more notes from week 1 in the National Football League when we get back on Sports by the Book.
Once you've satisfied your hunger, get ready for more of the hottest casino games in Vegas. Our 24-hour, 30-table non-smoking poker room proudly hosts all the most popular poker games with a variety of betting limits. Visit the poker room for a schedule of daily tournaments. Whether you're going to hold 'em or fold 'em, the best place for poker is at South Point Casino. You'll notice that our craps tables are usually the loudest in the casino. If you've never played, join one of our free craps lessons to find out what makes this game so exciting. Check with the craps dealer for schedules and give it a roll. Bingo is also an exciting way to spend your time. We offer 7 sessions of bingo every day. Bingo! And each session includes a cash ball jackpot, 12 bingo games, a progressive double action game, and a $10,000 bonus coverall. Electronic units are available. If you haven't played bingo with us, give it a try today. Guests can also get in on the action at our one-of-a-kind race and sports books. 2 separate rooms designed to maximize your experience and comfort. Our sports book, with over 400 seats, puts you right in the middle of the action, 24 hours a day. The friendly ticket writers are happy to help, and it's conveniently located next to the famous Del Mar Deli, where you'll find supersized portions of delicious deli items like roast beef, pastrami, and Reuben sandwiches, or soups, salads, and pizza. Plus spectacular desserts fit for a king. And right next door is the race book, Over 150 seats, each with its own TV screen. There are 16 interactive player terminals, so you can bet right from your seat.
Welcome back in Sports by the Book, South Point Studio. It is a football frenzy here on Sports by the Book. I'm Jeff Parles. 15, or actually not even 15 minutes from now, about 10 minutes from now, Chris Andrews and Vinny Magliulo will join me on set. We'll get some thoughts from Chris from week one and a look ahead at tonight's game as well. The Jets and the 49ers, as of the moment, the Niners a 4-point favorite behind us with a total of 43.5. Been sitting pretty there for about the last few hours on both the side and the total. Let's take a little quick detour to college here. We're going to do this every Monday on the show. On Thursdays, we'll do the NFL side on the power rankings. But today, since it's a Monday, and we have all the data points we need for Monday in college football, here's my top 10 entering week number 3. And Notre Dame falls out after that shocking upset at home against Northern Illinois. A stunner, 28-point favorites. The Huskies go on the road and stun Notre Dame. And the AP voters put Northern Illinois into the top 25. Not the top. They're not even a top 45 team in the country, guys. Let's come down. But Notre Dame falls out. And because of that, the Missouri Tigers, the Ole Miss Rebels, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Miami Hurricanes all move up. And Miami moves into the top 10. The front of the list is unchanged. And I know there'll be some that say, why is Texas not changed? Why did they not hop Ohio State in your rankings? Well, if you watch Sports by the Book this morning with Alex White and Kenny White, Ohio State had arguably had the second best performance of anyone by a power rating perspective this week. Only Tennessee had a better performance by a power rating perspective. And even though Texas dominated Michigan from the get-go in Ann Arbor, that's not enough to move Texas up ahead of Ohio State. Georgia stays number 1 despite playing an FCS and Tennessee Tech and beating them up. Ohio State destroyed Western Michigan. And Texas at number 3. And instead of there being a gap between 1 and 2 and the rest, I think it's a gap between 1, 2, and 3 and then the rest. I didn't move Oregon off of 4. That is a really good Boise State team they played. A Boise State team that, quite frankly, the Mountain West title rematch between Boise and UNLV should be for a playoff spot, regardless of what happens in the non-power conference leagues. That was a good win to get that win for Oregon. I'm not moving them. Penn State, yeah, they messed around. They barely beat Bowling Green. They're still a good, really good team. And I still have them slightly ahead of all those teams in the SEC, but that could be subject to change shorter rather than later because this is all these teams. 5 through 10 are super, super tight in my ratings. Alabama stays in front of Missouri despite an unimpressive 26-point non-cover against South Florida. Mizzou became the first team since 2019 to pitch shutouts in the first 2 games. They shut out Buffalo in a 38-0 win on Saturday. Ole Miss annihilated Middle Tennessee, 52-3. They finally play a real team in Wake Forest next week. Tennessee, arguably, well, Kenny White and Alex White had them as the most impressive team of the week. Tennessee beat NC State by 41 in a neutral site. I considered moving them up to 7, but I still have reservations against them. With them, we've seen what happens with Josh Heupel when they're in pure road games more so than anything. And in Miami, they beat up on an FCS team over the weekend, and they still look. I know they didn't really play a good team in Florida week 1, beat them by 24. But Miami's talent, there's no arguing. Even with wins over Florida and Florida A&M, there's no arguing how good they are. And I have them sitting at number 10, just slightly ahead of USC, who comes in at number 11. LSU also almost famous on this list. Notre Dame still almost stayed in there as well, but they shift out, falling all the way to number 13 after their loss, a nice 6-spot slide. All right, real quick here also, college football-wise and NFL-wise, just a few more takeaways before we start looking ahead to week 2 and week 3, respectively, in both of those segments of football. College football-wise, I just want to throw up a point I just said with Oregon. The last bid in the college football playoff has to go to the highest-rated non-power conference team. Liberty should have lost in Las Cruces to New Mexico State. Appalachian State lost by $1 billion to Clemson. I don't want to hear those two teams again this season as being a potential playoff team. Neither of those teams are close to being playoff caliber. But you have a bunch of playoff caliber teams that are out there in the non-power conferences. Boise loses by a field goal at the gun to Oregon as almost a 3-touchdown dog in Hodson. That's an impressive loss. They also have the best player in the country at the moment in Ashton Genty. I'm okay if you want to argue that with me. Just watch the kid play. He's the best player in the country, and if he was anywhere but Boise State, he'd win the Heisman Trophy this year if he stays healthy. UNLV thumped Utah Tech. Yeah, I can't take too much, but Houston went on the road and lost to Oklahoma by 4. UNLV went to Houston's house and destroyed them from the get-go. Memphis handled Troy as a big favorite. They get Florida State this upcoming week. They're only 5-point underdogs in that game now because of what Florida State has been. And Texas State crushed a good UTSA team this weekend. Texas State gets Arizona State on Thursday. They're a small underdog at home at St. Marcos. I don't want to hear anything else about those other teams. Those 4 teams of the non-power conference teams, look for some good plus to make the playoff money bets out there on any of those teams still. Because those are the only 4 teams that should have a shot to win that auto bid of the non-power conference teams, because those teams are so much better than everyone else. Back to the NFL. Looking at what happened this week across the league, I mentioned it with Matt Hamilton. And it is something to keep in the back pocket moving forward in week 1. Again, from Steve Pazzarozzolo of the 33rd team now. NFL week 1 passing touchdowns. 2019, 61 of them. 2020, limited preseason, 52 or no preseason. That was the COVID year. 52. Went back to the same numbers 2019 and 2021 as 61. Went back down in 2022. What started happening? A lot of teams started sitting their quarterbacks in the whole preseason. 51 of them. Last year was only 37 passing touchdowns in week 1. Astronomically low number. This year is only 33 with 1 game to go. They could end up tying it if both guys throw 2 touchdowns tonight, which is more than possible. Betting market says that. But the quarterback play is so down early in the season in comparison to what it was the last few years. Heck, the Cleveland Browns' Deshaun Watson wasn't even the worst quarterback of the day yesterday. And he was purely dreadful. Only 156 passing yards, multiple turnovers, and getting booed off the field. Bo Nix averaged less than 3 yards a pass attempt yesterday in his NFL debut. That was the lowest for anyone in an NFL game in almost 20 years. Caleb Williams yesterday threw for under 100 passing yards, and the Bears won without an offensive touchdown and covered the number. By the way, the Tennessee Titans, real quick on that, on a fun betting note, the Tennessee Titans led the game 17-0, didn't cover as a 4-point underdog. Before yesterday, since 2019, underdogs are 4 points or less, or 4 points, 4 points or more, 4+ points to lead by 17 or more in a game in the National Football League. We're 66-1-1 against the spread before yesterday. Evan Abrams on that stat. The only other team that I covered, pretty famous one. How about the 2019 playoffs when Houston was up 24-0 on Kansas City at Arrowhead and ended up losing that game by over 20 points. Doesn't happen very often. But the biggest thing more than anything, and this is just to keep in the back pocket moving forward for week 1, especially if players don't play in the preseason, offenses are even further behind. And you see it with the quarterback play in that number, only 33 passing touchdowns through 15 games here in week 1. We're not even going to take a break because everyone's all set on the desk here. To my right, over 2 of the best there is in the business. And I'm happy they're both here because I know you all at home love having both Vinny Magliulo on the far side of the desk and Chris Andrews right to my right, breaking down what we saw in week one and looking to tonight and more. Chris, you have the sticky note, and I always know when the sticky note appears, important stuff's about to be said here on the show.
Well, I just don't want to forget some of this stuff that I had. We talking pros or college?
Wherever you'd like to go, my friend.
Let's start in the pros. Okay,
Please.
You talked about Atlanta.
Yeah.
Okay, what was that? We were talking earlier, Vinny and I. What was this old saying? Old quarterbacks don't get healthier. Something like that.
Yeah.
They don't get younger for sure.
They definitely don't get younger.
They don't, and they don't heal. And they were under center, which is like 0 time.
They had Minnesota, or excuse me.
I know.
Dollar in the jar there.
Yeah.
Atlanta ran 0 plays from under center. And that was what made Cousins awesome in Minnesota.
Well, play action.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his game.
Yeah.
And he didn't move. So there's a worry there. I don't. What's the kid, the rookie kid?
Michael Penix Jr.
Penix. They go to Penix this quick. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely something wrong. But is that a foretelling of tonight with Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. The other thing I got written down: Cincinnati. I think I said it on your show. 12 rookies. And I know the Brown family, they're the cheapest owners, and I know they're looking at that. Oh, my goodness, I got 12 rookie contracts. I am so lucky, So we worried about that. Before I hand over to Vinny, a couple things here. The Browns and Carolina both have huge quarterback problems because of meddling owners. And here's the thing, the Browns owner, and I forget his name right now.
Jimmy Haslam.
I'm terrible with the names. Anyway, he was with the Steelers organization as an owner.
He
obviously wasn't taking notes. They traded 3 first-round draft choices and then some and signed this guy to the worst contract in the history of the I'm sorry, not the NFL, in the history of sports.
I agree with you.
And I'd have to go look at some of these soccer contracts that went for $1 billion.
You can go North American sports, and I'll give you that.
North America, and then I'll let you go into Argentina or the La Liga or something else. And Carolina, same thing. Now Tepper was not with the Steelers, but he grew up in Pittsburgh, not far from where I lived, and he obviously didn't take notes either. These meddling owners have ruined their franchise for years to come by meddling into what should be football people's decisions.
Yeah, I didn't even mention earlier, just like Carolina DOA yesterday.
Yeah,
right from the get. Young's first pass was intercepted, and it was a bad one at that. And Stroud, Stroud.
Yeah.
How about Anthony Richardson, picked number 3 in that draft? That was the most entertaining game of the day yesterday because of those quarterbacks.
He's raw.
Yeah.
But I think that kid can be good. I really do.
I agree with you, Chris.
And one last thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Vinny.
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
You talked about there being kind of like exhibition these first couple games. So, again, let's not take too much away from it. And here's the example I'm going to use. How many years did Belichick's Patriot team not look so good in the opening weeks? So a lot of them,
often.
So let's take our time with anointing anybody champion or anything like that, because I think we get to like week 3 or 4, we're going to know a lot more than we know right now. I mean, we still have to react and move our numbers and do all that sort of thing, but let's not overreact. So that's what I'm going to, my little caveat here, that even though it's regular season, technically they're playing like it's preseason.
Absolutely.
Chris is absolutely right about one of the biggest mistakes that are made, I think, by bettors from week 1. This is NFL, week 1 to week 2 is overreacting to what happened in week 1, right? And we're not going to do that. We're obviously going to pay attention to what happened yesterday, and you can kind of get an idea of who needs a lot more work. And this is injuries aside, right? I mean, the Rams played terrific last night, but their offensive line, took a beating. Nakua is now on the injured reserve list for a bit. So that you have to kind of put that aside, but you do have to adjust the rating according to that. Listen, no team is as good as they looked yesterday, and no team is as bad as they looked yesterday.
Maybe Carolina's the exception.
But you still have to put in the case of Carolina, you've got to look and see, okay, what were the issues last year? They certainly were prevalent yesterday, the same issues, maybe even more. Yeah. But it would be easy to overreact. I could tell you this: there have been more. And Chrissy and I were talking about this on the way into the studio. There have been more adjustments to the college power ratings over these first 14 days than there are going to be, I think, in the pros, right? Now, certainly less teams. You've got a better fix on things and whatnot. But one thing I think we would all agree on, and a lot of people would agree on, there has to probably be a rethinking. And I'm not, an NFL coach, but you still have to pay attention to what you see. What's happening in the offseason in terms of training, right? Because these are players now. It used to be, Chris, when we were growing up, they went to camp to get in shape, and they played. The starters played in the preseason. Yeah. Now, they didn't play the entire game, but I'll tell you what, week 3 of the preseason, let's go back to when there were only 4 games. We remember when there were 6 games in the preseason.
When there were 6. That's how old these two guys
now,
are.
I'm not suggesting that there should be 6. I'm not suggesting that, but listen, by the way, they were not leather helmets. We were post-leather helmets.
Yeah, but I remember when they had one bar.
But they had one bar, okay. So, but the point is that these athletes and all sports, they're in tremendous shape all year round. All right, they're terrific physical specimens and all. But something's got to be rethought in terms of this preseason on the approach, because there was also a time. Oh, you have something. You have something.
Monster news out of the injury report in this game
tonight.
Christian McCaffery is inactive.
Oh, Jesus.
And was that your number one pick?
Go ahead. Do what you need to do.
Would you
do what you need to do? Yes, do what you need to do.
Well, there you go. So now let's go to that, but I'll finish my thought on the other. By the way, Ann, was Christian McCaffery your pick, your first round? You're picking. See, there you go. Fantasy is a nightmare. Christian McCaffery.
By the way, real quick on that. Real quick. That is from NFL Network right now. Mike Garafolo on the report on that.
Okay.
With I'm trying to find the actual injury report, which should be out already.
But it should be. They're on the field warming up.
No, so. I know, but that's what we have right now. And this is coming and this is coming from a very this is reputable here. This is from the NFL's actual media on McCaffery. But he was nursing that calf and Achilles all week long, and actually really the last 3 weeks. But that is a significant deal. And when Chris comes back in, we talk about quarterbacks moving the number, and I was actually going to ask about Jordan Love, but since this just happened, we got to go with this.
Well, I'll tell you,
this is the one non-quarterback.
I'll set Chrissy up with this statement. Christian McCaffrey is the most impactful player to the number outside of a quarterback, and I'm not aware of. I would. There's other guys that are pretty impactful, but when you say Chris, he's probably the most impactful non-quarterback.
Yeah.
By virtue of what he does in terms of not only rushing but in receiving, and in that scheme, which is a very diverse scheme, he probably means the most. So we were when we came in here, the game was 4.
No, not anymore.
There you go. Now it is
3.5.
Okay,
3.5, and then I lowered the total 0.5 point too. Well, to Vinny's point, listen, we know he's good. I mean, anybody with eyes could see he's good, but they gear their offense around him too. It's not just
the whole scheme.
That absolutely. Ability. I mean, you want to say, listen, we're in week 1. Saquon Barkley, I thought, looked really good, and they may want to gear a lot of their offense around him too. If he goes out, I think he's going to be impactful. On the defensive side, I mean, we know the stats with T.J. Watt, whether he plays or doesn't play, is a huge difference in the game. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple guys out there, but I think I'd have to have, at this point in time, McCaffery at the top of the list.
Yep, I think you're going to see. I mean, obviously games are adjusting. That's an enormous announcement, and getting back to what I was saying before that too, in terms of overreacting again. I don't know what the answer is for some of these teams, and they're so cautious with preseason games, but you can tell very clearly yesterday. And we'll probably see it again. Maybe this week it wouldn't be as pronounced because they've got a game under their belt. Who did not play, and where were the clusters of the ones that did not play at all in the preseason. It was pretty evident yesterday.
Well, just real quick on injury-wise, you mentioned it earlier, just looking ahead, even past tonight now with this bombshell that McCaffery is going to be out. The Rams, you mentioned that last night, great effort, but they lost 5 different offensive linemen got hurt, which is Vinny, Chris, you guys talk about cluster injuries all the time. That is a gigantic deal for them.
That's like games moved. 2.5 points.
And by the way, Jeff, just to interrupt, and it's important because we had to learn at great cost, right, Chris? We did not pay full disclosure. There was a time we did not pay close enough attention to offensive line injuries as much as we paid to the skill position injuries, even to defensive injuries. You know, the Ronnie Lotts and the Lawrence Taylors. But I'm not talking about recent. I mean, we've learned. There was a time, 30 years ago for you.
Let's say we've been doing this a while. We did learn lessons, but we learned lessons because we got beat.
That's it. They were expensive lessons.
If everything's great, you say, "What's there to learn?"
But
we know everything.
You have to learn. When people say, "Yeah, you've seen it all," we've seen a lot.
Yeah,
you never see it all. Nobody sees it all. No. But you've got to also adjust to what you see along the way. And if we haven't adjusted, we wouldn't be sitting here right now, 45 years plus later. So,
continuing on the injuries real quick, looking ahead to next week, there's one game that the number is totally different now because of what happened in Sao Paulo. Now, Green Bay got pretty fortunate news today.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like Love is going to miss more than 2 or 3 games. But on the flip side for this game on Sunday now, they play a Colts team that, again, they lost, but I thought they looked pretty good. They looked great on offense.
I did too.
Defense needs some work, but when you see Malik Willis starting a game for the opponent, that might be a good thing. And we've talked about this a lot. We talked about it a ton last year when Rodgers went down.
Right.
But this is one of those where this feels like 7, maybe even 6.5, 7 with Malik Willis in for Jordan Love, who's likely not going to play this week.
I'm going off memory here. I think I moved it 7 points on my power ratings.
Yeah.
Might have been 6, but I'm not sure. It was either 6 or 7. But listen, I mean, Malik Willis, we've seen him. He's not a complete unknown. He's just not very good. Who's a third-string quarterback?
Oh, you're going to like this.
Yeah.
Penn State former quarterback Sean Clifford is the backup.
Oof.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, they're a 3-point dog this week, right at home.
The look-aheads I saw before the week had him as 3.5.
There's a 7-point. You could say a 7-point difference here.
Yeah. Sean Clifford. I mean, I rooted for him at Penn State, but he was a competent college quarterback. I'll give you that. What are they? A jag? Just a guy?
Just a
guy.
Or a Jaguar that blew a big lead yesterday. At least a 3.5 one. I would have been insensitive if it didn't, guys. But it's actually funny looking at the market now here, Chris. Really everything. It's now exactly the number you had to move it to, 41.5 and 3.5 across the whole market on this game tonight. Now.
Well, you had to. I mean, like I said. What is that him right there? They show him. Is that him?
That is Brock Purdy. That's Brock Purdy. They have the.
I thought that was Ryan McCormick.
Doesn't
he look like Ryan?
Well, he got a little bit.
He looks like Ryan.
Yeah, he got a little bit. But that is, we haven't had a monster injury like this in the year and a day now that we've done this on Monday. But we get the big injury, especially with you guys in here, and it's. You're not going to find it anywhere else where you have people actually behind the counter as these injury reports are coming out. So make sure you're with us every single week here on these football frenzies. We're 3 to 4 on Monday and Thursday, and of course, all 3 of us and Jimmy are here on Fridays. From 2 to 4, getting you ready for the week.
Hey, you only got a minute. I got a couple college things. I just want to throw real quick.
We can go over by a minute.
Really?
Too, so yeah.
I had to tell Kenny White. We're not paying overtime. You understand?
Okay.
Okay. Just so you know.
Okay.
Hey, it's our studio.
What did you have from college?
Well, again, Vinny and I talked about this on the way over to the studio. How many times are we going to forgive Oregon for these?
So I do have a question for you guys on that real quick. I have Boise State significantly higher than I think the market does, in part because I think they have the best player in the country.
He's terrific.
In Ashton Genty. But it is a valid question because now this is 2 games with 2 different significant issues. They couldn't block in the first game. And in this game, they couldn't hold on to the football. And they were very lucky to have that 1 touchdown hold up because the kid clearly dropped the ball.
I didn't see that. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Vinny told me he lowered him 3 points. I'd have to go check my notes. I lowered him probably about that much.
Oregon.
Oregon,
I believe it.
Yeah.
Oregon. But, still early. Long way to go. The other team, how about Oklahoma? I mean, I heard Kenny talking about they looking ahead. What are they playing Texas already? That game's in a month.
I'm in the camp now. I know you had them in your top 10 entering last week, Chris.
Oklahoma. I told you it's my annual right of summer to overrate Oklahoma.
So this was the 1 year going into it where and Vinny, I know you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. Jackson Arnold's not an SEC quarterback, and it's funny because before you guys walked in, I was saying that hey, the non-power conference bid should more likely than not be UNLV versus Boise's rematch in the Mountain West title game.
Don't throw Fresno out yet.
UNLV went to Houston and stomped them.
Oh, I know. And Houston looked pretty good.
And Houston looked competent on Saturday.
Yes, they
did.
In
a very difficult place to play.
You could tell that they had the wrong favorite early in that Houston UNLV game.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just telling you, don't throw out Fresno yet. Okay.
They played Michigan well for about 54 minutes before the wheels fell off.
That team might be okay. And like I said, being from Reno, I know I've seen a lot of those kids come in and play, a lot of those Central Valley kids, and those are tough kids. Those are tough kids. So don't throw them out just yet.
I will say this too about the college game. I think one of the great positive byproducts of the college football expanded playoff is not just going to take place with those games. It's having an impact now because let's face it, the reality is we would not be getting a lot of these games now.
Yeah.
I'm talking about non-conference. Now, we know the conferences have expanded.
Yeah.
But when you look at Alabama, Wisconsin, this week alone, we've got so many more really good games, to book. People want to see them. So that is a real good byproduct of the play. We're not just going to have to wait for the playoffs to see some of these matches because there's no way a lot of these games. And I know these people were scheduling in advance, but they had to make some scheduling adjustments when they went to the new format. And it's good that we're getting them now. We've had them in college basketball for a long time.
Oh yeah,
in the interconference games. Now we've got them in football, and it's great for business.
Well, you look at this week. I mean, these are out of conference games. We get Washington State, Oregon State, and Utah State. I mean, these are great rivalry games.
Great regional action.
And maybe actually a lot of those teams I just mentioned are kind of on down years. You think Oregon State isn't going to show up this week against Oregon? I guarantee they are.
And the games in Corvallis too.
Yeah. So. I mean, and even like Utah State, not very good this year, but they've had good teams over the years. And Utah, I think Utah's a different team away from home. And that might turn out to be a good game. And Washington State, that's a numbers like 4.5. That's going to be a good game.
Yeah. And even though this is not the greatest of slates this weekend, there's only one ranked matchup on Saturday, which, by the way, as we all expected, it's Boston College at Missouri, as we expected entering the season.
They did that for you, Jeff.
Oh, whatever. That's
your alma mater.
There's a bet to be made in that game, but I'm going to hold that for later in the week. But Friday night this week is an awesome slate where Vinny, you always say the week starts on like for college this Friday night. UNLV goes to Kansas, which all of a sudden
is a good game.
Nice game.
I mean, that's an excellent game, even though Kansas did not look good in a loss to Illinois over the weekend. Daniels doesn't look like himself, which is not good.
And Illinois was my big disappointment last year. They might be a lot better this year.
And then Kansas State and Arizona is a great game on a Friday night in that Big 12 game that isn't a Big 12 game.
Right, yeah. K-State was a pretty good game. Who did they play? Tulane on Saturday?
Yeah, they survived.
That was a pretty good game. That was a good game, though. Yep.
Hey, don't go to sleep on Thursday.
Yeah.
Arizona State at Texas State.
I mentioned it earlier in the show. That's a very important game for the college football playoff.
Yeah. So that's great. I mean, again, the expanded playoff, we would have never gotten Texas and Michigan.
No chance.
In week 2 or 2.5. I still can't say week 0. But you never would have got. They did start scheduling some big games on opening weekend over the last few years, but there's no way would have gotten Texas at Michigan at the third week of the season. It wouldn't have happened.
Well, and not only that, it's lost its luster because Wisconsin's not any good. But Alabama going to Camp Randall is still.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that setting?
Fun,
don't sell them out too quick. Right? I don't think they're very good either. I really don't. But at Camp Randall, and you got one of these Southern teams. I know what they're hoping the weather's like up there. 40 is.
You want some snow in September? That's what you're rooting for.
Snow. You might get wind though. I got a couple other quick notes.
Yeah,
one interesting thing. So Tennessee, who I think has looked great so far, but you made a good point, Jeff. They're maybe not the same team away from home. That was a neutral game against East State, but they totally dominated that game. Mm-hmm. I thought they really looked good. They're playing Kent State, the lowest ranked team I can remember, and I had a different rating system. I had a Cincinnati team in the early 80s that I always was my earmark for the worst team I ever had to evaluate power rating. But I had a different rating system at the time. This is the lowest rated team since I've been on this system, which is probably about 20 years. The lowest rated team.
The total on that game, if it's below 70, is probably good because Tennessee will play 62.5.
Yeah,
good work, team. 62.5. Tennessee scoring 62.5 on their own probably in that game.
You only have 60 minutes of play. That's the only thing.
Well, that's the thing. Well, you know what? Thankfully, it's an FBS versus FBS because they'll probably play the full 60.
Yeah. And then 2 other quick notes. Big move this last week against Air Force.
Yeah.
I went and looked at that box score. There's something wrong with Air Force.
It was right.
Yeah.
It was right. San Jose was the better team all the way through.
All the way through. But not that San Jose was so great, but I think Air Force has some real problems, which I always Air Force was one of the teams I always rooted for. There's a bunch of usually smaller guys that would really play hard. And I said, well, if I needed to pick some guys to defend the country, I think it would be them. They just had that kind of attitude.
Absolutely.
But they're bad this year. They're a real bad team. And the other one, Vinny and I talked about it early too. I remember an old New York guy from we were thinking maybe 5 points or something like that. An old Irish guy, bookmaker. He goes, kid, sometimes price tells you to win it. And I'm looking at the Indiana UCLA game. Oof. Indiana's a 3-point favorite at UCLA. That might be price telling us
UCLA is not particularly
UCLA is
good,
bad. And Indiana, I've said from the beginning, I think I missed the boat on Indiana, but I'm adjusting quickly. I think they're pretty good. When
I saw the numbers come out, that was the one that caught my attention the most for the exact same reason as you.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, Indiana. I know there's no home field at the Rose Bowl for UCLA anymore, but they're favored on the road, and I'm kind of with you. It's like there's a reason that number's what it is.
When I saw that, I just remembered Dennis Casey was his name. Price tells you to win it.
All right. That's all we got for you here today. Again,
Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football coming your way in about an hour 10. By the way, real quick, actually, I forgot to mention it. Jackpot card. If you missed it on Punchlines earlier, jackpot card.
Oh, update that, Chris.
Yeah.
Set a record, I think.
Set a record.
39,000 some change.
Pretty good.
So,
pretty good. Yeah. Good luck to Frank tonight, who took a.
He ain't gonna win.
Called a shot right there. Frank with only 1 loss so far through the 14 games, amazingly enough, going into tonight. All right, that's all we have for you. Drew Dog, Ann, Jerry, thank you as always. Vinny, Chris, awesome stuff.
You forgot about Ann.
I said Ann.
I'm behind that computer.
Oh, and from your angle, Ann's a little bit blocked. I see it.
She's holding her head because of McCaffery.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
we're back. So, again, new schedule now that we're in football season. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., right here on the Sports by the Book channel, Alex White, Kenny White. Get you ready for the day in sports. And then the next time you see a Football Frenzy show will be on Thursday at 3 p.m., getting you ready for a great Thursday night game between Buffalo and Miami right here on Sports by the Book, Football Frenzy. I'm Jeff Parles. Good luck on all your plays, everyone.